Today I'll be going over a tutorial on how to play 5 Tribes, the Gens of Naqala. It's from the wonderful company Days of Wonder, which of course brought us Ticket to Ride, and designed by Naqala. This is a Euro game in that you want to get the most victory points that you can in order to win the game. There are several different ways to accomplish that goal, and there's a very unique mechanism that you use in the game in order to achieve your goals. So let's take a look. This is the initial setup for a game of 5 tribes for 3 or 4 players. In this instance, I'm just doing 3 players. Everyone starts with 8 camels of their color. They also start with 50 gold coins. I've got them upside down right now because during the game, you don't want the other players to know how much money you have, as it will affect bidding. But you start with 50. And so you can have 9 5 coins and 5 1 coins to start with. You also have a turn order marker of your color. In a 2-player game, you would get 2 of these because you would get to take 2 turns per round instead of 1 turn per round. Also in a 2-player game, you get 11 camels instead of 8. When you do your setup for the game, you take all these tiles and you shuffle them. Then you lay them out in a 6x5 grid, and that is your board for that game. Then you take the magic meeple bag, which looks like this. Then you randomly draw 3 meeples for each tile and put them out on the board. For the first couple of games, while you're getting used to it, I highly recommend that you have them standing up to start with. I'll show you why when I show you how meeple movement works. This is the merchandise area. There's a stack of cards here, and you lay out 9 merchandise cards. This would be the first one, this would be the 9th one. The reason the order is important is because it affects how the markets work and also how one of the actions of the meeples works. You also lay out 3 gens from the stack, and the gens have special abilities. You will have opportunities to purchase gens throughout the game, and some of them will give you abilities that have no cost and will just continue throughout the game. Some of them will have abilities with a cost. Usually the cost is in either elders or slaves. And you can see in these merchandise cards there are goods and there are slaves. And it says at the bottom how many there are in the deck. There are 18 slaves in the deck, and there are different numbers of these goods. So some of the goods are more common than others. For instance, vases, there are 6 of those in the deck, whereas for parchment or linen, I'm not sure which that is, there are 4. So it's a less common item in the deck. Once you've placed all your meeples out, you then put all of your turn order markers into the black bag. You draw them out at random and place them on this turn order track to start with. In addition to each tile being worth a different point value, there are also different types of tiles on the board. Let me show you what they are. This is a large market tile. When you end your meeple turn here, you can pay 6 gold and choose 2 of the first 6 items in the merchandise row. This action's not mandatory. You can also go to a small market and pay 3 gold, and then you choose 1 of the first 3 items in the merchandise row. If you end your turn on a palm tree, you must place a palm tree on this tile, whether or not you have a camel on it. On this tile, if you end your meeple turn here, you may purchase a gen if you have either 2 elders or an elder and a slave. If you end your turn on this tile, you must place a palace, whether or not you have a camel on this spot. The goal of the game, because it's a Euro game, is to score as many points as possible. So you're going for victory points. And there are a lot of different ways to get victory points in this game. Coins at the end of the game are worth 1 point each. You also get points for certain meeples. You will get points for the gens, and that's indicated by the number at the top right corner of the card. You'll also get points for any tile that your camel is located on. For instance, that one would be 6 points, and I'll show you how you're able to do that as I show you gameplay. You also get points for having palm trees on tiles that you have a camel on. You get points for having palaces on tiles that you have a camel on. And your merchandise you can either sell throughout the game to acquire more coins for bidding, or you can keep them till the end of the game and they'll score just like they would during the game, which is in sets. And everybody can have a cheat sheet that describes all of the different actions that the different gens can take. And as you can see, there are a whole bunch of different gens. And on the back side is a little quick summary of the game. And it also includes a chart to tell you how much sets are worth. So for instance, if you had 4 different types of cards, if you had fish and gems and vases and parchment, and you had 4 different types of items, you could sell them for 13 gold. That would also translate to 13 victory points at the end of the game. So the main mechanism of how this game works centers around meeple movement. And the way meeple movement works is you're going to pick up a handful of meeples from one tile, and by placing them one at a time on adjacent tiles, you will move them around the board. There are 3 rules to meeple movement. The first rule is that you have to end your turn on a tile that has the same color of a meeple that you have in your hand. The second rule is that you can only move vertically and horizontally. You cannot move diagonally. And the third rule of meeple movement is you cannot go immediately backwards. I couldn't go here and then here. So what you would do is you can figure out, you say I have 3 meeples, and let's say that I wanted to end my turn over here. Since the only common color here is blue, I have 1 blue in my hand and I have 1 blue here, I would need to make sure I have this blue one in my hand at the end of meeple movement. So I could place 1 here, and notice that I'm laying him down on his side. That way it's easy to be able to backtrack in case you make a mistake. And then I could put 1 meeple down here, and then the last meeple goes down here. So I ended my movement on a tile that has the same color meeple as the one in my hand. You then pick up the meeples that match the color that you just put down. In this case, I had picked up 2 builders. I'll go over what each of the 5 tribes does. You take the action on the tile. In this case, it would be to place a palm tree. And you take the action of the meeples. So let's go over what each of the meeples does. The yellow meeples are viziers. They are worth 1 point at the end of the game. If you have the most viziers at the end of the game, you get an additional 10 points. And that is you alone have the most. Not tied with someone else, but you alone have the most. An additional 10 points. Elders are worth 2 points at the end of the game. They are also currency for purchasing gens. In order to purchase a gen, you either need to pay 2 elders or 1 elder and a slave. They can also be used for some of the gens to pay the cost to take the action on the gen's card. The blue meeples are builders. If you pick up blue meeples, you would then count the number of blue tiles surrounding. For instance, if I picked up blue meeples here, I would count the number of blue tiles that are adjacent, including the one that was on, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4. I would then multiply it by the number of meeples in my hand, which is going to be a minimum of 2. So if it was 4 times 2, I would get 8 gold that turn. The green meeples are merchants. However many green meeples you pick up allows you to take that many items from the front of the line in the merchandise. So if I picked up 3 merchants, I could take the first 3 cards and put them in front of me. The red meeples are assassins. If you pick up assassins, you may do one of 2 things. You can either assassinate 1 meeple that's in front of one of the other players, or you may assassinate another meeple on the board. It must be within this whatever number of assassins you pick up. For instance, let's say I picked up 3 assassins from this tile. I would need to assassinate a meeple that's within 3 tiles from where I picked up these assassins. So the game is played in rounds. At the beginning of the round, whoever is first on the turn order track gets to bid on where they want to try and go on the next round. You can bid anywhere from 0 to 18, so you could bid 0, 1, 3, 5, 8, 12, or 18. And that bid, whatever amount you bid, will place you on that spot. So if there's something you see that you really, really want to do and you don't want the other players to get, you could bid 18. But it's a risk because you have to think about the coins also in terms of victory points. You're basically spending victory points in order to get that. So you want to make sure that you're going to get back the value that you're placing on your bid. You could also bid a smaller amount and just hope that nobody outbids you. So let's say that blue is going first and he sees a move that he would really like to take. So he goes ahead and bids 18 right out of the start. He would then pay 18 coins and they would go directly to the bank and he would move to that spot. Then pink would bid, and let's say pink just bids 5, and orange say bids 0 because they're not concerned about where they're going to move. And then that's going to determine the turn order for that round. Now if anyone else were to bid 0, say in a 4-player game, or if no one decides to actually pay money, anyone who bids after this first person gets to slide that token backwards. So if you're the person who bids 0 first, you're always guaranteed to go last because you're going to be slid backwards on this board. So once that's done, you move this blue marker over here and blue will take his first turn. And I'll show you an example of a turn to start with. There is a particularly good move to start with on this random layout of the board, and I will show you that move now. He is going to pick up these 3 meeples. He is going to lay one down here. He is going to lay one down here, and then he's going to lay one down here. And now I'll tell you why this is such a good move. For one thing, he's going to be able to pick up all of these elders, which gives him a lot of points. The other thing it does is anytime you clear a tile by picking up all of the meeples that are on there, which means they all have to match, you get to place your camel there. And that's the only time, unless you have a djinn that lets you do otherwise, that you would place a camel. So that's the primary way that you claim tiles. So what he's done is blue has gotten a tile that's worth 6 points. He's picked up 4 elders, which are 2 points at the end of the game, but they're also currency for djinns. He also gets to take the action of the tile, which is to purchase a djinn. So he can pay 2 elders, which would go back into the bag. So they're now out of the game. And then he could purchase a djinn. So he purchases Monkir, which is worth 6 points at the end of the game. Anytime somebody else places a palace, he gets 2 coins. And if he places a palace, he gets 1 coin. So he bid 18 for this turn, but it's definitely going to pay off in the long run for him to have done that. And he places the djinn in front of him, and then the next player takes their turn, which would be pink. So pink is going to go to a large market, which is a pretty good action, especially at the beginning of the game. So they're going to pick up this pile of meeples. They'll put one down here, they'll put one down here, and then they'll put one down here. And in this way they get to pick up 3 viziers, which are worth 1 point at the end of the game. And then they get to take the action on the tile, which is to pay 6 coins, which go to the bank, and then choose 2 from the first 6 items that are out. So let's say they just choose parchment and fishes. So now pink has a set of 2. Which is not really worth enough to sell, but is the start of a set that they could sell later or save for the end of the game to score points. Either way, either the coins will score points or the coins will be available for bidding. Then orange gets to take a turn. And orange sees the opportunity to go to a large market as well as pick up some additional items. So orange picks up these meeples and then lays them down, say like this, and ends the turn there. Orange gets to pick up these meeples, which means they get to place a camel in that spot because they've cleared the tile. They get to take the first 2 items, and you notice that I didn't replace the cards. The cards and the gens don't get replaced until the end of the round. So they would take the first 2 cards because they picked up the merchants. So they have a slave and some vases. And then they can also pay 6 gold to go to the market, which they will do. But you'll notice now there are not 6 cards to choose from. There are only 5 cards to choose from, but they still get to choose 2. So they're going to pick up parchment and another slave and hope it pays off. If you want to sell a set of items, you have to do that at the end of your turn. And once the round is over, you replace all the cards. So all of these are going to get slid to the front. And then you'll place enough out to fill it back up to 9 cards. And then you also replace any gens that were purchased. And then the next round starts, again starting with bidding and then moving meeples and taking actions. I'm going to super fast mode play a little bit further into the game so you can see what the board looks like more towards the middle of the game. Are you ready? Here we go. So now we're getting more towards the end of the game, and you can see how the board changes as you've moved meeples around, removed them from the board, put camels out, and now we've got a couple palm trees and some palaces out. The game ends when someone places their last camel or when there are no legal meeple moves left. When the end of the game is triggered, anyone who hasn't played that round can still finish, and if there are still legal meeple moves, if the end of the game was triggered by someone placing their last camel out, everyone can take a turn as normal, moving meeples. If the end of the game was triggered by no legal meeple moves left, then everyone can go around and activate abilities of their gens if they want to, and then the game ends and final scoring happens. I do want to point out that you can have as many palaces as you want on a particular tile. For instance, Orange took this tile and put a palace on it, and then had a chance to go back later and end their turn here and put another palace on it, which is 2 palaces is worth 10 points at the end of the game. So that's good to do. And we've got a palm tree out on this spot. If Pink wanted to, they could try and come back here to put another palm tree out to give them more points at the end of the game. But now let's talk about endgame scoring. Obviously, it's not the end of the game, but you've probably seen enough to understand how the game is played and now what it looks like as you get more towards the end. And you can see how meeple movement starts to become limited. Because again, the 3 rules of meeple movement, very important. First is that you have to end on a space that has the same color meeple in your hand. You can only move horizontally and vertically. And you can never move backwards and then, or forwards and then backwards again. So for scoring, the game comes with a pad for scoring, which I do recommend using because there are a lot of things to score in the game. The first thing you would score is coins. They translate directly to points. So you would put down the value of coins that you have. Then you would score 1 point per vizier. For instance, this person has 2 viziers. And both pink and blue have 3 viziers, so no one would get the bonus for the most. But for instance, if pink only had 2, orange only had 2, and blue had 3, then blue would score an additional 10 points for having the most viziers. Elders are worth 2 points each at the end of the game, unless you have this particular gen, which orange does. That makes elders worth 4 points at the end of the game instead. So having 3 currently, they would score 12 points instead of 6. You then score the points for your gens, which is located at the top right corner of your gen. That amount, you add them up, and that is your score for gens. Then you add up all the tiles that your camels are on and score that. So pink has an 8 and a 15 and a 6, and of course they have more by the end of the game, but you would add those all up and put them in this row. Then you would get 3 points for each palm tree that is on a space where you have a camel. If you have put a palm tree out but you don't own that space, you don't have a camel on it, you don't get any points. It's just for a place where your camel is, and you can only have 1 camel per space. You get 5 points per palace that's on a tile you own. And then you also would then total up your merchandise. And again, like I said, it's done in sets. And for instance, the orange player has a set of 5. See how there are 5 different things? And 5 different items would give them 21 points, as noted on this score sheet on the back. Again, that's also how much it would be worth if they decided to sell them in the middle of the game instead. If you have multiple sets, for instance, pink has multiple sets. They have 1 set of 5 items, and then there's 1 set of 2 items. You would add them up separately, a set of 5 and a set of 2, and score it that way. Then you make your total, and whoever has the most points wins the game. So that is 5 tribes. Hopefully you can pick up the game and play it. I would encourage you to do so. Thanks for visiting the Dragon Table. I will see you next time.